What's going on, everybody? Ryan Miner here, the Faith House Sports Network, and I have 5 players that you might be panicking on, but should you really be? We'll get to that in here in a minute. But first, let's look back at our Week 11 players who I have said after their Week 10 performance were something we should react to. And the first one we're going to look at is DeAndre Swift. Now, Swift was one that I was saying based on the stale offense running, something that had to change between Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron. Well, that Monday morning, or Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday, it came out the news of Shane Waldron being fired. So Matt Eberflus' team took over. Something came out different, and the Chicago Bears, although losing another close game to the Green Bay Packers from a blocked field goal, DeAndre Swift actually did what DeAndre Swift should do, get us the fantasy points that we love, especially in Week 12. I mean, you can run on Green Bay, as we see in other teams running against them. But Swift, surprisingly, was able to have 14 rushes, 71 yards, and a touchdown. The downside of this is Roschon Johnson still played a huge part, but he was able to take 10 carries for 33 yards, but stole a goal line touchdown from DeAndre Swift himself. So Swift could have had a better day. He still got 16 fantasy points, and for most people, depending on what your league scoring is. And I was also able to, catch a couple balls for 13 yards on top of that. So I'm fine with him going forward. He's got Minnesota coming up. It's a little bit of a tougher matchup, but we can see this offense might be on the up and up as Kyren Williams also looked better. Rome Odunze did something. DJ Moore, as I said, it was kind of hard to play him. He got 7 receptions for 62 yards. So another, 13-point PPR performance day. Very good. I'm still going to proceed with caution on this team just because, all right, 1 week does not make it 100% better, but we can say that the panic on Swift can go down a couple meters. We could be, say, maybe 2, 3. I'm not in 100% saying he's back to normal, but I'm willing to go ahead and say we're going to go put it back in my lineup next week. Number 2, Breece Hall. And what can I say about Breece Hall? He lit it up, everyone. 16 attempts, 78 yards, a touchdown, 7 receptions, 43 yards, and another touchdown. Good for 30 PPR fantasy points in Week 12 or Week 11 for us. But, overall, the whole Jets offense still stumbled. Devontae Adams is still getting the ball. Should be Garrett Wilson getting the ball more, but we're not getting that. So luckily for the New York Jets, they get to go on a bye. So hopefully this reset is good. But as of right now, if this can stay with Hall performing like expectations were like this, then we could, I would say, we'll lower our expectation. We'll lower our meter again. So that, as of right now, I'm 0 for 2 based on how they performed this week, guys. But hey, I'm here to take full responsibility. If you set your lineup, bench them because of what I said, go ahead and blame me. I'm cool with that. We're all good. So prepare to get Breece Hall back in your lineups. Number 3 would be Zay Flowers. And Zay Flowers was kind of a, like I said, boomer bust type of play. And this game was a very close nail biter, being 18-16 with the Steelers beating the Ravens. And it was just a field goal fest for the Steelers. All they did was kick field goals. They didn't score 1 touchdown. But Zay Flowers, he was second in the team in targets behind Justice Hill, but was only able to turn in 2 receptions for 39 yards and a touchdown. Mind you, the touchdown saved him, good for 11 PPR points, but outside of that touchdown, didn't look so good. Still going to be kind of iffy on this whole offense, just because you don't know who's going to boom, who's going to bust. Zay Flowers did okay this week, but like I said, he's more of that boom bust wide receiver 3. This is kind of never expect. So we'll count that as a good one hit, as a panic. Number 4, Brian Thomas. I was willing to say bench him because of the way Mac Jones was looking, and Brian Thomas basically, you can throw a pie in my face on this one. 5 receptions, 82 yards, good for 13 PPR points. But, this whole offense was in a tailspin sputter trying to keep up with the Lions. I mean, the Lions just pounced them 52-6. I mean, it was a scoring fest for the Lions. They never put in once. Every offensive possession they scored. So it wasn't really fair. The whole entire team in general couldn't even rush the ball, as they only rushed the ball for 41 total yards and threw the ball for Mac Jones had 138 yards, so an interception. Very bad game for him. Nothing that we can really brag about, but Brian Thomas, it's still iffy on how I see him. He was tied in team targets with Evan Ingram. If this is something that we can see going forward, then I could definitely see Brian Thomas being someone who I'm getting a little bit more trust in, but also at the same time, not really feeling the same way as I would if Trevor Lawrence was in the lineup. But on the bright side, we do have the Week 12 bye coming up for him, but after that, you get the Texans. So if you can, I'd fire him up as a wide receiver 3 at that point. So we'll bring the panic meter, I say, down to a 4. I'm still kind of watching it, but outside of that, he's good to go for you guys. So put him back in those lineups after his bye. But first, well, not first, secondly now, we're going to kick off our Week 12 panic meter. We'll look at these Week 11 performances real quick, kind of see how you should panic. Some people have already panicked. I've already had questions asked me on X to see if, should I start them? Should I bench them? We're going to go over it here real quick. You guys are going to like it. So let's get started here. And my first one is going to be from Thursday night, Jayden Daniels. When you look at Jayden Daniels, you don't really think that it was going to be something too bad, but he just did not look like himself. Like when you look at him, you're thinking it should have been a great game, something that was going to be more high scoring. It was very boring until about the end of the game. But it was, that this is now back-to-back weeks for Daniels to be a fantasy underperformer. He's produced less than 15 fantasy points in back-to-back straight weeks. And it also doesn't help either that your main wide receiver and Terry McLaurin gets 2 targets, not just like in one drive, the whole game. 2 targets, he had 1 reception, 10 yards. But one of our writers, Mike Finelli, even stated Thursday night prop bets that Daniels could struggle against an Eagles defense whose secondary has been improving ever since their bye. And it showed quite well as they were definitely out there to lock down Terry McLaurin. And then the weird thing is it was Austin Eckler who led the team in targets, receptions, and yards. And then right behind him was Zach Ertz, who saved the day for Jayden Daniels and caught that touchdown, but it was already too late. Jayden Daniels seems to struggle against teams who are actually above a 500. If you look at the way his fantasy performances are, those defenses are teams that are struggling. But if he gets a really tough team, he kind of can't run. He ran for, what was it? 18 yards on Thursday night. So it was not a good outing performance that we hope to see. He tried a couple most mainly handoffs between Brian Robinson Jr. and then a couple to Austin Eckler, who only had 2 carries for 7 yards, but just dominated in the receiving game. 8 for 89. But to end that one, the Commanders, I think, will bounce back. I can see Jayden Daniels being put back in fantasy lineups. Back to QB1. Don't overreact to this. He's got the Cowboys this next week. I'm willing to think that we'll have a nice bounce back performance. Easily should be well over, I could see 20 fantasy points this coming week for him. So fire him back up. No issues there for me. My number 2, Tony Pollard. Now, I have Tony Pollard on one of my fantasy football leagues, and I don't know if you noticed, but I'm watching the game, but basically on my phone looking at the score real quick. and seeing that no fantasy points are being produced. I'm like, is he injured? What's going on? Which then reminded me earlier in the week that he had that foot injury, and that kind of slowed him down. So he's kind of questionable going into the game. So I kind of take this as a game script type of thing where he was more scripted out. But then, like, looking into the game, I kind of watched quick videos of it. That offensive line could not hold anything. There was a lot of penalties. I mean, if Derrick Henry was still there, I don't even think Derrick Henry would have had a good game. So we'll chalk this up as that one bad week for Tony Pollard here. And I think, we'll fire him back up next week against the Houston Texans. Expect a nice bounce back performance. I'm not panicking on it yet. He's a solid RB2. If you draft him as your RB1, I'd panic more there. But here I have, as most leagues, I've taken him as an RB2. I'm totally fine with this type of performance. It's going to happen. So don't be afraid. Put him back in your lineup. Let's fire it up. Let's go. One player, though, I am freaking out a little bit about. And that's Deebo Samuel. And Deebo Samuel's got the old 19 jersey on in this video. That's great. I love it. Maybe he should go back to that, because with wearing the number 1, he's definitely not performing like the wide receiver 1 that we were hoping. Now, was it late Sunday morning, I want to say, that Sleeper popped up, ESPN popped up, that George Kittle was going to be possibly out with a hamstring injury, and that he was going to test it more as to be a true game time decision. So I'm thinking, all right, no Brandon Ayuk, no George Kittle. This is going to be a Deebo Samuel / Christian McCaffrey game. No problem, right? Like, fantasy points galore. That did not happen at all. What was actually surprising that happened was it was Jauan Jennings who paced the team in targets and receptions. He went 11. He had 11 targets, 91 receptions, or not 91 receptions, 10 receptions. Wow, could you imagine 91 receptions in a game? That would be a fantasy football winner for the week. But 10 for 91 and a touchdown, good for 25 fantasy points. And then you look at Deebo Samuel, 4 receptions, 22 yards. Yeah, it was 7 targets, but still another underperforming week. This is getting to be tough. I don't know what's going on with Samuel. He is just not a player that I'm excited to start, and I definitely have the panic meter a lot higher. Especially, I'd probably put this at a 6-7 range as of right now, just because he's just not, performing like I was hoping he would perform, especially with players like George Kittle out. We always make fun of it. If all 3, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, and Deebo Samuel are healthy, one of them goes off, the other 2 kind of flounder, or 2 of them go off, one of them flounders. No Brandon Ayuk, no George Kittle. I was thinking Deebo Samuel week, definitely bombed. Didn't happen. Jauan Jennings is looking like the wide receiver 1 here. So if you have a league that you still have trades this week, like if you're Jauan Jennings, and if I had Deebo Samuel, I'd be trying to get him off my team just for the namesake. So we'll get past that. Number 4, and this one might be a surprise because he has not scored a touchdown in 3 straight games, and that is Kyren Williams. The bonus with Kyren Williams, is I would not hesitate, because he had 15 carries for 86 yards, but it's also the second game this season, including week 7, where he didn't even receive 1 target in the backfield. So usually, he's usually seeing 3, 4, 5 targets a game. This week he didn't see it. So for that being said, he's got plenty of opportunities. It's been 13 plus opportunities every week. I wouldn't hesitate to put him back in my lineup, although he does have the Philadelphia Eagles coming up, which is a little bit of a tougher opponent to run against. So he might struggle again. So it could be 4 weeks without a scoring, but you have to remember, he is still getting those opportunities. Those opportunities could lead into scoring. he could fall in the end zone on that. So that was a little bit of a little panic. So if lower your expectations this next week. But after that, the 4 of his following 6 opponents after that of the Philadelphia game are bottom 10 against running backs. So you could possibly have a league-winning running back here in Kyren Williams coming out. And my last, and probably my least favorite one, because I was excited about him, thinking that, he was going to have a good game, and that's Mark Andrews. And we've gone back and forth all season long with Mark Andrews, trying to get something well out of him. And it wasn't that, it was going to be a tough matchup, but why is Isaiah Likely the one that outpaced him? It was even Zay Flowers even had a better game. And, you heard what I said earlier about Zay Flowers. And not to mention, Andrews was fifth on his own team in targets. So what's that tell you? Was he scripted out? It's like, or, was there not that many passes thrown? Lamar Jackson threw 33 passes. So it wasn't that. It's just the way how everything fell into it. But Andrew gets the Chargers and the Eagles the next 2 weeks before the bye, who are very tough against the tight end. They rank the Chargers rank 7 against tight ends, while the Eagles rank 3rd. So it could be another tough matchup for Andrews going forward. And then seeing him struggle like this, it's gonna be tough. I mean, his next great matchup, I would say, would be Week 16. He gets the rematch of the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is what I thought was actually gonna be a good matchup. But I got the panic at a 9 on him. So with that being said, if you've been starting him this long, you're gonna continue to start him. If you find something better on the waiver wire, let's talk about it. Shoot me a comment down below if you guys want to know anything else. But that's a tough one. Oh, one more thing. I only gave you guys 4 players from the last week's recap. The 5th player, who I forgot to recap, was Malik Neighbors. And he was on bye this week. And I was saying, the way Daniel Jones was playing, something had to change. And the change came down this morning that Tommy DeVito is replacing Daniel Jones as a starter. So what do we do with this? I'm upping the panic meter just a little bit, 6 right now, just to be on the safe side of my own mindset. But I want to see how DeVito plays with Malik Neighbors first before I really feel confident in my lineup. I'd say wide receiver 3 at best going forward until proving me wrong. I'm hoping he proves me wrong and I can eat crow after this video next week. Well, that's going to do it for this week's Panic Meter. Once again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to hit them down below. Like, subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Talk to you then.